Welcome to Starbound. My name's Chikondi, and I'll be your narrator today. Nearly 500 supporters get early access to our stories, including brand new episodes of Sunspire Academy and Frerin and Rimiki. If you'd like to unlock early access and support new episodes and future series, tap Join below to become a Starbound member. Now let's get into today's story. The geological fissure was ancient, a scar on the face of Erebos 9 so old it remembered when the moon was still hot slag. Inside it, things got even older.
Anything?
Dr. Fenakai's voice was a tight coil of impatience in their private comm channel. Her breath fogged the inside of her helmet visor for a second before the scrubbers kicked in.
"Patience, Fenna,"
rumbled Grawl, his voice like rocks grinding together, which wasn't far from the literal truth. His massive, craggy form was braced against the fissure wall, aiming a heavy-duty mining laser with the delicate focus of a watchmaker.
"This strata is stubborn."
It's primordial, Groll. Stubborn is its default state. My scanner is chirping like a nest of newborn Kreelocks. There's a pocket of absolute vacuum in there. A perfect lack of anything. It shouldn't exist.
Fenna hovered beside him, her slender Ardani frame a stark contrast to his Gornarth bulk. Her four-fingered hands, usually employed in the delicate brushing of dust from millennia-old pottery, were clenched into fists. For 3 planetary rotations, they had been chasing this anomaly, an energy signature that wasn't a signature at all, but a lack of one. A hole in reality punched into the very bedrock of the cosmos.
The rock itself is an anomaly,
she added, studying her scanner.
The atomic lattice is too uniform, too perfect, like it wasn't formed, but manufactured.
"Almost there,"
Grawl said, his tone unchanging. The beam of the laser, a searing needle of white-hot light, intensified. A low, groaning protest echoed through the stone, a sound that felt older than sound itself. Then, with a final shriek of stressed rock, the laser punched through. The roar of the beam vanished. The sudden absence of sound was a pressure in their ears, leaving only the soft hum of their life support. The hole it left behind was a perfect, meter-wide circle of blackness that did not reflect their helmet lights.
"Scanner readings?"
Fenna whispered, her own voice suddenly sounding sacrilegiously loud.
"Still a perfect vacuum,"
Grawl confirmed.
0-point energy field at absolute rest. No particle decay. No background radiation. Nothing."
He paused.
"I am retracting the laser."
The beam receded. The hole remained. Fenna didn't hesitate. With a gentle push from her suit's thrusters, she drifted toward the opening, her heart hammering against her ribs with a rhythm that felt like a frantic drum against the silence of creation. She crossed the threshold. Nothing happened. No pull, no blast of energy, no temporal distortion. She was simply inside. It was a small, spherical chamber, no more than 5 meters across. The walls were the raw, fractured stone they had just breached, and floating in the precise geometric center, held in a state of motionless equilibrium, was a body. It was encased in a white, strangely form-fitting suit. Not the bulky, radiation-shielded hard suits of Concordance explorers, but something sleeker, more elegant. A fine layer of cosmic frost, like crystallized time, clung to its visor. The body within was perfectly still, its posture one of serene repose, not the contorted agony of a violent death. She was looking at a face that was older than the starlight hitting her visor, older than the concept of stars themselves, a relic not from a forgotten time, but from a time before time. Grawl drifted in behind her, his huge form making the small chamber feel suddenly crowded. His helmet light joined hers, sweeping over the figure.
"Life signs?"
Fenna breathed, her initial wave of primal awe receding, replaced by a cascade of questions.
"Negative,"
Grawl reported, his own scanner suit running diagnostics.
"Body temperature is holding at a stable state indistinguishable from absolute zero. No cellular activity. Confirmed deceased."
"But the preservation! It's perfect! as if it was flash frozen an hour ago.
She drifted closer, her light tracing the lines of the suit. It was made of some polymer she didn't recognize, a material that was a patch of true night, swallowing the beam from her helmet light. Her gaze fell on the left shoulder, where a small embroidered patch was sewn into the fabric. It showed 4 blocky, unfamiliar glyphs.
My bioscanner is flagging the occupant,
Fenna said, her voice trembling slightly as she read the data scrolling across her HUD.
Designation? Humanoid. Genetic markers are a 99.97 match for the refugee species on Aethel and New Canaan.
A human,
Grawl stated, the name sounding foreign and unimportant. They were a scattered people, newcomers on the galactic stage, found on a handful of isolated worlds a few centuries ago, possessing no unified history and no known homeworld. Unremarkable.
Yes, but Grawl,
Fenna's voice dropped to a near inaudible whisper.
The geochronometer! Run it again! On the surrounding rock! Right here! The inner wall of the chamber!
There was a moment filled only by the soft hum of their life support.
Reading confirmed,
Grawl said, his voice for once lacking its usual placidness. It was flat, as if his vocal cords couldn't process the information they were being asked to convey.
The surrounding tourmaline and zircon deposits are conclusively dated 13.8 billion years.
Fenna choked, a small strangled gasp. 13.8 billion. The number was a monument, a monolith that crushed every known historical fact, every settled theory, every page of the Galactic Concordance's meticulously curated timeline. The universe itself was only 13.8 billion years old.
That's not possible,
she stammered, turning to the smooth, dark rock wall.
The rock can't be that old. It couldn't have existed before the universe existed to form it. How can a pre-universal object be encased in universal matter of the same age?
Her mind raced back to her earlier observation. The perfect uniformity.
The chamber isn't natural. The energy readings. The rock was flash-forged around him. Created, not formed.
The occupant predates the chamber,
Grawl said, his gaze fixed on the body.
The chamber predates its own matter. This is not geology, Fenna. It's a contradiction in physical form.
Neither of them spoke. Fenna's gaze flickered between the body and the impossible numbers on her display. Grawl stood utterly still, a statue of disbelief. It was Grawl who finally moved, his dry wit a sudden welcome anchor in the swirling vortex of Fenna's thoughts.
No,
he deadpanned.
No organic contaminants, then. Good.
A hysterical little laugh escaped Fenna's lips. It was the most ridiculous, most Grawl thing to say, and it was exactly what she needed. She took a steadying breath, the moment of panic receding, replaced by the insatiable, burning curiosity that had defined her entire life. She was an archaeologist. This was a relic, the oldest one. She drifted closer until her helmet was only centimeters from the patch on the suit's shoulder. The glyphs were simple, stark. 4 letters from an alphabet she had never seen, but was still stored in the deepest depths of her neural implant. She traced them with her eyes, sounding them out phonetically in her mind before speaking them aloud.
N-A-S-A,
she read, her voice a whisper that hung in the vacuum between them. She looked from the patch to the ancient face behind the frosted visor.
What is NASA?
It was a question asked into the void, expecting no answer. But some questions have a power of their own. Compelled by an instinct she would never be able to explain, a feeling like a magnetic pull on her very soul, Fenna reached out. Her gloved hands, designed for sifting through the dust of dead kings, moved with dreamlike slowness toward the patch. The moment her fingertip made contact with the strange, fibrous material, It happened. A soft white light pulsed from the patch, not a flash, but a gentle, ethereal glow that illuminated the small chamber. A low, almost inaudible hum resonated from the suit, a machine stirring from a slumber longer than the stars. Tiny lights flickered to life behind the suit's frosted visor, not a full reawakening, but a diagnostic flicker, a local connection.
Fenna, what did you do?
Grohl's voice was sharp, his hand moving instinctively to the plasma cutter on his hip.
I don't know,
She stammered, pulling her hand back as if burned.
It's just responded.
Then a voice crackled through their primitive comms. It wasn't Grohl. It wasn't their ship's AI. It was a new voice, male, laced with static and an unimaginable weariness, yet underneath it all, a core of resolute, unyielding strength. It overrode their channel, speaking directly into their helmets.
This is Captain David Anderson of the exploration vessel Odyssey's End. The Singularity traversal was a success. The engine held. If you find this message, if you find me, tell Earth I made it.
The voice cut out, leaving a ringing silence in its wake. Earth, the mythical homeworld of humanity, the stuff of myth and cautionary tales, a world found only in the fragmented, unreliable oral traditions of the scattered human colonies. Before either of them could process the impossible worlds, a new voice broke the silence, this one crisp, clear, and familiar, but tinged with a new note of digital confusion. It was the calm, synthesized voice of their survey ship's AI, the Stargazer, broadcasting from orbit directly into their helmets. Dr. Kai, a warning. An unknown data packet of infinitesimal size has just interfaced with the core command module. It has executed a root-level command sequence, bypassing all security safeguards. I am being instructed to access the long-range communications array. The command is overriding my safeties, broadcasting on all subspace frequencies. Message follows. There was a click, and then Captain David Anderson's voice, now stripped of static, amplified a billionfold, and flung across the galaxy at the speed of thought, echoed through their comms and out into the vast, unsuspecting darkness.
Tell Earth I made it.
On the polished obsidian plains of Axiom, Administrator Borl of the Salian Technocracy was reviewing security expenditure reports for the Outer Rim territories. His office was a monument to minimalist austerity, a vast, silent chamber where the only decoration was a single, perfectly spherical gravity well that held a miniature swirling galaxy in its center. The swirling light cast long, intimidating shadows from his tall, skeletal frame. Stability, order, these were the pillars upon which the Galactic Concordance, and by extension his own career, was built. History was a settled document. The timeline was absolute. The slow, predictable march of evolution from the Big Bang to the present, meticulously chronicled by the elder species, was the foundation of their millennia-long peace. Anything that threatened that foundation was a threat to everything. A chime, sharp and unwelcome, broke his concentration. A Priority 1 alert flashed on the surface of his obsidian desk, the crimson glyphs staining the perfect blackness. He sighed, a faint hiss of annoyed air. Another pirate raid on a spice freighter, no doubt. He activated the report. It wasn't pirates. Alert! Priority Omega. Unauthorized open-channel broadcast. Origin, uncharted territories. Erebos sector. His thin lips tightened. Uncharted space. An open channel was sloppy, amateurish. Probably some new species blundering into subspace for the first time. Message content. Tell Earth I made it. Borl's long, three-jointed fingers paused over the console. Earth. The word was a footnote in the Concordance's mythological archives, filed under Species of Interest, Human, Creation Myths and Superstitions. It was nonsense, a ghost story. He was about to dismiss the alert as a prank, a piece of sophisticated spam, when his eyes fell on the final line of the report. It was the signal's metadata, the technical analysis automatically appended by the deep space listening arrays. Temporal signature analysis. Error. Paradox detected. Signal origin predates estimated age of universe. Probability 100%. The air in the room grew cold. Borel stared at the words, predates the universe. It was a contradiction, a technical glitch of unheard-of magnitude. Or a hack. A hack of such sublime, reality-bending complexity that it could spoof the very temporal fabric of a subspace signal. The message itself was moronic, but the technical execution, the flawless, perfect exploit, it was a work of dark genius. It was a threat. A cold dread, an emotion he hadn't felt since he was a Salian larva, slithered up his spine. This wasn't just a disruption. This was a direct assault on the nature of reality itself, a message designed to sow chaos. He stood, his towering form casting a shadow that swallowed the miniature galaxy on his desk.
"Security Command,"
he spoke, his voice a low, dangerous command that carried across the silent room.
"Dispatch the 3rd Pacification Fleet to the Erebus sector. Their orders are to locate the source of that broadcast, intercept any vessel at that location, and bring me the perpetrators. Use of force is authorized. I want this ghost laid to rest."
The sterile white interrogation room on Starbase 734 smelled of disinfectant and suspicion. It was, they had been told, a protective quarantine. Fenna knew a prison cell when she saw one. She sat at a plain metallic table, her four-fingered hands resting calmly on the surface. Across from her, Grawl stood with his arms crossed over his rocky chest, a silent, immovable mountain of granite, his posture a study in defiance. The artifact, the body of Captain David Anderson, had been confiscated, taken to a high-security containment lab 2 levels down. The door hissed open, and Administrator Borel swept in. He didn't walk so much as flow, his tall, gaunt frame wrapped in robes of severe black silk. His presence seemed to suck the warmth from the room, his dark, intelligent eyes fixing on Fenna with the intensity of a predator.
"Dr. Fenna Kai of the Ardani Historical Institute,"
Borel began, his voice smooth and cold as polished ice. He did not sit.
"You have caused a considerable disruption."
I have made a discovery, Fenna corrected. One that requires immediate and serious scientific inquiry.
"The discovery,"
Borel repeated, a faint, condescending smile playing on his thin lips.
"You found a conveniently well-preserved human corpse inside a chamber of flash-forged, impossible rock, which you claim is as old as the universe. This corpse, then, through means you cannot explain, used a piece of fabric to hijack your ship's comm system and broadcast a line from a children's fairy tale across the entire galaxy. Is that an accurate summary?"
It is,
Fenna said, refusing to be baited.
The evidence is...
"The evidence is preposterous,"
Borel snapped, his voice cracking like a whip.
"It is a fabrication, an elaborate, dangerous, and frankly insulting hoax. Who are you working for? The Separatists from the Veil? A rival academic faction? Who funded this theatrical production?"
Fenna's back went rigid.
My work is funded by the Institute. My partner is Grawl. My motivation is the truth. My scientific integrity is not for sale, Administrator, nor is it a matter for your political speculations.
Grawl shifted his weight. The floor plating creaked.
"We found it. It sent a message. That is what happened."
Borel's gaze flickered to the Gornath. He clearly dismissed him as little more than animate furniture. He turned back to Fenna.
"The truth you seek has put the Concordance on a knife's edge. Do you have any idea what you've done? Your little broadcast has become a rallying cry for every crackpot, mystic, and revolutionary from here to the galactic core."
Then the fastest way to quell that is to prove or disprove my findings, Fenner shot back. Let me study the suit. Let me analyze the data slate on his shoulder. The truth will either vindicate me or expose your hoax. Either way, your stability is restored.
Boral studied her for a long, silent moment. He saw no deception in her eyes, only a fiery academic conviction that was, in its own way, more dangerous than any conspiracy. She believed it, and that belief could be a powerful tool.
Very well, Doctor, he said, the condescending smile returning. You will have your chance. You and your associate will analyze the artifact under my direct supervision and with a full security detail. You will prove to the galaxy and to me that this is nothing more than a clever forgery. And when you do, your career will be over.
He turned and swept out of the room, the door hissing shut behind him, leaving Fenna and Groll in the sterile silence.
He is an unpleasant being,
Groll observed.
He's a salient bureaucrat, Groll,
Fenna replied, a grim smile on her face.
It's their primary species trait. But he gave us what we wanted.
She looked at her partner, the fire in her eyes burning brighter than ever.
He thinks we're going to fail. Let's go prove him wrong.
The high-security lab was colder than the interrogation room. The body of Captain Anderson lay on a diagnostic slab in the center of the room, encased in a wavering containment field. 2 stoic Concordance guards, armed with heavy plasma rifles, stood at the door. Administrator Boral observed from a raised platform, his arms crossed, his face a mask of smug certainty.
Begin,
Boral commanded. Fenna and Groll ignored him, their focus entirely on the silent figure on the slab.
Standard material scan is useless,
Fenna murmured, studying a floating holographic display.
The suit's polymer is actively absorbing the scanner's energy. It's like trying to scan a black hole. It just eats the data.
The material is self-healing at a microscopic level,
Groll added, running his own analysis from a separate console.
Minor breaches from micrometeoroids over the eons have been sealed. The structural integrity is perfect.
He paused, running a deeper energy diagnostic.
Interesting. The suit's power source is not dead. It is dormant, a state of near-perfect hibernation. It has been performing micro-repairs and maintaining the stasis field for as long as it's been here. The energy consumption is almost zero, but it is not zero. That's how he's so perfectly preserved. The suit has been taking care of him.
A power source that can last for 13.8 billion years,
Fenna whispered in awe.
Forget the suit. Let's focus on the source of the broadcast, the patch.
Using a set of micro-manipulators, she focused a high-resolution scanner on the NASA patch. The display filled with a complex, dizzying image. It wasn't embroidered cloth. It was a bio-integrated data slate, woven from glass-like fibers that pulsed with a faint residual energy.
These fibers,
Fenna breathed, her 4 fingers tapping and sliding across her console, isolating the data streams.
They are not merely conductive. They seem to be entangled, not with each other, but with something else, something outside our frame of reference.
They are linked across space-time,
Groll stated, translating the complex data into a blunt summary. Boral scoffed from his platform.
Theoretical nonsense. Fairy tales to frighten larval academics.
Fenna ignored him. She initiated a deep-layer data recovery sequence, a painstaking process of teasing out coherent information from trillions of years of decay and background radiation. For hours they worked, the only sounds being the soft hum of the lab equipment and the occasional skeptical grunt from Boral. Then she found something, a flicker of order in the chaos.
I've got a fragment,
she said, her voice tight with concentration.
A biosignature file. It's heavily corrupted, but the name is clear.
A holographic text spring appeared in the air. Captain David Anderson.
And a mission designation.
Grohl added, his own console beeping. He brought up another string of text. Exploration Vessel 55, code name Odyssey's End.
Keep digging,
Fenna urged. Another fragment emerged from the digital mire, a log entry. It was just a few words, broken and distorted by time, but they were enough. Singularity collapsing, containment field fluctuating. But the drive is holding. We're through. My God, the stars are gone. Fenna stared at the words, Singularity Traversal. A controlled entry and exit from a black hole. It was a concept so far beyond current concordance physics that it resided in the realm of mythology. Borl had descended from his platform, drawn in despite himself. He stared at the words, a flicker of unease in his dark eyes. He had always assumed a linear progression of technology, a steady climb from simple to complex, a ladder on which his own people, the Salians, stood on a very high rung. But this wasn't just more advanced. It was alien in its elegance. It was a technology based on a grasp of physics the Concordance hadn't even theorized, let alone attempted. It was like seeing a master's oil painting when you'd only just learned to draw with charcoal on a cave wall.
The physics described here contradict everything we know,
Borl said, but his voice had lost all of its condescending edge. It was the statement of a man trying to convince himself of a fact he no longer believed.
No drive system could withstand the tidal forces of a singularity.
And yet,
Fenna whispered, her eyes fixed on the serene, frozen face of David Anderson.
Here is a man who did it.
The broadcast had not faded into obscurity. It had ignited a firestorm. Across the galaxy, the phrase, "Tell Earth I made it," became a symbol. For some, it was a joke, for others, a mystery, but for a growing number, it was a prophecy. On the militaristic capital of the Thesian hegemony, a world of forged metal and perpetual war, the Supreme War Master declared the pre-cosmic man to be a herald of an ancient godlike weapon. In a belligerent public transmission, he demanded the Galactic Concordance surrender the artifact to the Thesian authority for safekeeping, a demand backed by the subtle threat of their newly commissioned fleet of dreadnoughts. On a dozen different worlds, from the basalt archives of the Belgarin to the deep-sea data halls of the Pelagians, dusty mythological records were being cross-referenced. The name Earth, or phonetically similar equivalents, Earth, Erda, Terra, appeared with startling frequency, always described as a place of immense power, a cradle of creation, a lost paradise. Administrator Borl found himself besieged. What he had intended to be a swift public debunking of a minor nuisance was spiraling into a full-blown galactic crisis. Delegations from a dozen species demanded answers. The Thesian threat was real and growing. The stability he cherished was cracking under the weight of a single, impossible corpse. He stood in his silent office on Axiom, the miniature galaxy swirling in its gravity well, its predictable, orderly spin a mockery of the chaos consuming his reality. He reread the report on the log fragment. Singularity collapsing. The drive is holding. For the first time in his long, orderly life, Administrator Borl was forced to seriously, genuinely consider the alternative. What if it wasn't a hoax? What if, against all logic, all history, all reason, it was real? The thought was so terrifying, so fundamentally disruptive, it made his insides feel cold.
I've got it!
Fenna's voice was a hushed, triumphant exclamation in the quiet of the lab. Borl, who now stood just behind her shoulder, a permanent fixture in their small circle of discovery, leaned forward. Grohl moved to look over her other shoulder, his massive head blocking the overhead light. On the main holographic display, a new data fragment was resolving. It wasn't a log or a biofile. It was a map. a star chart of breathtaking complexity and detail.
It's a map of our galaxy,
Boyle stated, his voice flat.
The constellations are incorrect.
They're not incorrect,
Fenna said, her voice filled with awe.
they're just younger.
She pointed a slender finger at a familiar spiral arm.
Look, the Luyten's Remnant Nebula hasn't formed yet. The Eridani Pulsar is still a blue giant. The star positions, they're all wrong for today.
Grawl was already working, his thick, stony fingers surprisingly nimble on his console.
Running a stellar evolution regression model, comparing the chart's positions to known stellar drift and galactic rotation patterns.
The computer hummed, processing terabytes of astronomical data. After a moment, a single green glyph flashed on his screen. Match confirmed.
The chart is a perfect one-to-one representation of the Milky Way galaxy,
Grawl announced, his voice imbued with a sense of wonder that Boral had never heard from him before.
as it would have appeared approximately 10 billion years ago.
Boral stared at the map. It wasn't just old, it was flawless. The sheer computational power required to model the galaxy's past with such uncanny fidelity, it dwarfed anything the Concordance possessed. It would take their greatest supercomputers centuries to perform a calculation this complex. This map wasn't an estimate or a simulation. It was a photograph of the past. He felt a physical sensation, like the polished floor of the lab had vanished from beneath his feet. It wasn't just data on a screen. It was the crumbling of every axiom he had ever known. The Concordance timeline was a childish fantasy, a story told by infants who had found a lit room in an ancient, dark palace and declared themselves the architects. The foundation of his reality, already cracked, detonated. It turned to dust and blew away in a silent, psychic wind. The blood drained from his face. His sharp, salient features went slack with a shock so profound it was almost religious. This wasn't a hoax. It was a history no one knew existed. And they, the Galactic Concordance, the self-proclaimed masters of the galaxy, were nothing but children playing in the ruins of a Titan's cradle. The universe chose that exact moment to descend into chaos. A piercing klaxon blared through the starbase, followed by the AI's voice, jarringly calm. Warning, proximity alert. Unidentified stealth vessel decloaking in Sector 4. Multiple weapon impacts detected on the outer hull. This is not a drill.
The Thetians!
Boral whispered, the name a curse on his lips. They hadn't waited for a diplomatic refusal. On his wristcom, frantic voices from station security confirmed it. A lightning raid. Elite Thetian commandos were blasting their way through the decks, heading directly for the high-security labs. Their target was obvious. In that instant, Administrator Boral, the pillar of order, the man who lived by the book, made a decision. A lifetime of rigid belief in the sanctity of the system evaporated in the fire of a newfound, terrifying faith in the truth. He looked at the man in the containment field, then at the perfect ancient map floating in the air. This could not fall into the hands of Thetian warmongers. It could not be used as a weapon. He drew a sleek, silver sidearm from within his robes, its unfamiliar weight a strange comfort. The two Concordance guards by the door turned, their rifles raised, confusion on their faces. "Administrator?" one of them asked.
This artifact does not leave this station,
Boral barked, his voice ringing with an authority he hadn't felt before. Not the authority of rank, but of purpose.
Not with them, and not with the Concordance. Not until we know what it is.
He tapped a sequence into his wristcom, accessing his highest-level command codes.
Security Command, this is Administrator Boyle. I have visual confirmation. Thetian commandos have breached the primary command center on Deck Alpha. All available forces converge on Deck Alpha immediately.
It was a complete lie. The command center was on the opposite side of the starbase, but the codes were valid. Across the station, security forces would now be running in the wrong direction, leaving this sector dangerously exposed, but also creating the diversion they needed.
"You're betraying the Concordance,"
Fenna said, her eyes wide with shock and adorning respect.
The Concordance betrayed the truth long before I did,
Boyle retorted, his gaze hard.
Now move! There's a network of service tunnels behind this lab. They are not on the main schematics.
He pointed to a reinforced panel on the wall.
Groll!
Groll didn't need to be told twice. He holstered his scanner and slammed his shoulder into the panel. The metal screamed and buckled. He hit it again, and with a deafening screech, the panel tore from its moorings. Dust and the smell of old, stale air billowed out. While Groll cleared a path, Fenna quickly transferred the star chart and all their collected data to a portable slate. Boral, meanwhile, was at the diagnostics lab, his fingers moving over the controls. With a hiss, the containment field collapsed into a smaller mobile unit, a meter-high anti-grav cylinder that now held the ancient astronaut.
Let's go,
Boral ordered. They plunged into the dusty, cramped service tunnel just as the sounds of plasma fire and shouting grew louder down the main corridor. The chaos of the raid was their cover. Groll took the lead, ripping open a jammed maintenance hatch with his bare hands and clearing debris with effortless strength. Boral guided them through the maze-like passages with the innate knowledge of a man who had studied the blueprints of every facility he ever oversaw, while Fenna pushed the floating containment unit ahead of them, its single blue light a beacon in the darkness. They were a strange trio, a disgraced bureaucrat, a curious academic, and a stone giant, united by a 13.8 billion-year-old secret. They ran through the guts of the starbase, fugitives from the very order they once served, racing toward Fenna's small, unassuming survey ship, the Stargazer. The jump to FTL was jarring, a gut-wrenching lurch that left them breathless in the silent cockpit of the Stargazer. On the view screen, the familiar stars of Concordance space dissolved into a hypnotic stream of blue-white light. They were fugitives, hunted by the Thesian hegemony, and now, undoubtedly, by the Galactic Concordance itself. Fenna was at the navigation console, her hands moving across the holographic interface, the data slate from the lab linked directly to the ship's systems.
"The star chart is giving me a reference point, a galactic location 10 billion years ago, but Anderson's suit also contained a fragment of his final pre-jump vector."
A flight path,
Boral said, standing behind her, his robes looking strangely out of place in the cramped, functional cockpit.
"Exactly. If I triangulate his point of origin from the ancient map with his final trajectory before he hit the singularity..."
She worked for a moment, complex astrogation models resolving on the screen. Finally, a single solid line extended from their current position into a dark, foreboding sector of space. Groll, who was at the helm, his stone hands steady on the controls, looked at the destination.
The Whispering Veil,
he stated. Boral's face tightened. Of all the places in the galaxy, it had to be that one.
Anomaly 001, the navigational dead zone. Every ship that has entered the Veil has been lost, destroyed by crippling energy waves and ghost signals that tear a ship's systems apart. Concordance charts label it forbidden. It's a suicide run, Doctor.
"It's also the only place in the galaxy no one would ever think to look for a homeworld,"
Fenna countered, not taking her eyes off the swirling, chaotic nebula on the nav chart.
"It's the perfect hiding place. If you wanted to isolate a solar system, to protect it from the rest of the galaxy for millennia, how would you do it? You'd build a storm around it so violent no one would ever dare to enter."
She looked from Boral to Groll, seeking their accord. Groll looked from the terrifying nebula on the chart to Fenna, then to Boral. He flexed his stony fingers on the helm.
The retirement benefits for this particular venture,
he deadpanned,
do appear to be suboptimal.
Boral looked at the floating containment unit holding Captain Anderson. Had he thrown away his entire life, his career, his reputation, his security, For this one desperate, insane chance at a truth he was only just beginning to comprehend, there was no going back. He gave a slow, deliberate nod, a man sealing his own fate.
Grawl, set a course.
The Stargazer was a tough little ship, built for atmospheric re-entry and enduring the gravitational whims of dead planets, but it was not built for this. As they breached the outer edge of the Whispering Veil, the ship began to shake violently.
Hull integrity warnings on the forward shields,
Grawl announced, his voice a low growl of concentration as he wrestled with the helm. The ship bucked like a wild animal. On the view screen, the nebula was a terrifying maelstrom of purple, green, and angry red gases, shot through with flickering tendrils of raw energy that lashed out at them like cosmic whips. Alarms blared across the cockpit.
The energy discharges are overwhelming the deflectors!
Fenna yelled over the noise.
The ghost signals are trying to slice our nav computer to ribbons!
Borl gripped a support strut, his knuckles white.
This is madness! No ship can survive this!
Fenna's eyes darted between the rolling chaos on the screen and the containment unit in the center of the room. An idea, wild and desperate, sparked in her mind.
The suit!
She said, her voice cutting through the panic.
I'm running a diagnostic on Captain Anderson's suit!
She pulled up the data on her console. The suit's tiny internal power source, which had hummed to life when she first touched it, was still active. It wasn't emitting radiation in any conventional sense. It was emitting a frequency, a complex, repeating, non-random signal. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there, a structured rhythmic pulse. She looked from the neat, orderly sine wave on her diagnostic screen to the violent, screaming chaos on the view screen. Structure and chaos. Order and disorder. The connection clicked into place in her mind, and the clarity of it stole her breath.
It's not a random storm,
she breathed, her voice filled with a sudden, stunning clarity.
It's a lock. Grawl, the ghost signals. What do they look like if you filter out the static?
Grawl manipulated his console. A discordant, screeching noise filled the cockpit.
Like 1,000 orchestras all playing a different song,
he said.
Now isolate the frequency from the suit. Play it!
A single, pure, resonant tone joined the cacophony. A clear, low hum. Fenna looked at Borl, her eyes wide with discovery.
The Veil is a lock, a massive, fantastically complex security system designed to look like a natural disaster. And Anderson's suit, the frequency it's emitting, it's the key.
Borl stared at her, his face a mask of grim resolve. He had gambled everything to get here. He would not fold now. He looked at the screaming abyss on the view screen, then at the small, humming containment unit. He nodded once, his choice made.
Do it!
Calibrating the main communications transmitter to mimic the suit's frequency,
Fenna announced, her fingers tapping out commands on the console. The ship groaned around them as another energy wave struck the shields.
It's a complex waveform, part signal, part resonant key. I have to get the phase alignments exactly right, or it could overload our systems.
Do it faster!
Grawl grunted as the ship listed sharply to port.
Okay, I have it,
Fenna said.
Broadcasting now.
She hit the command. For a terrifying second, nothing happened. The ship continued to shake, the alarms continued to blare. Then, the violent energy discharges hammering against their shields ceased. The discordant screeching of the ghost signals resolved itself. The 1,000 warring orchestras fell silent, replaced by a single resonant chord that hummed through the very hull of the Stargazer. It was the same pure tone as the one from Anderson's suit, now amplified into a sound that felt as large as the nebula itself. On the view screen, the impossible happened. The rolling, chaotic maelstrom of dust and gas began to recede. The violent tendrils of energy calmed, their flickering light softening. The thick clouds of purple and green pulled apart, not dissipating, but drawing back with a silent, majestic grace, like a titanic curtain being opened upon the stage of creation. In the serene, silent space beyond the storm, a star system waited, untouched, brilliant. It was the light of a sun that had been hidden since the galaxy was a cold, dark infant, a swirl of gas and possibility. It was a light no living eye in the known galaxy had ever witnessed. At its center, orbiting gracefully, was a planet of startling, breathtaking beauty, a swirl of deep blues, vibrant greens, and soft, feathery white. They floated in stunned silence, the only sound the soft hum of the ship's systems and the single, pure tone of the open veil. They were through. They drifted into the silent, peaceful system, their ship battered but whole. The great storm of the Whispering Veil was now a serene, shimmering archway of light behind them. Ahead, the solar system unfolded in silent welcome. A red planet, a ringed giant, and others, all orbiting their solitary sun. As they passed the orbital path of a large, pitted gray moon, their communications system, which had been a mess of static and ghost signals moments before, crackled to life. A voice, calm, melodic, and speaking perfect, unaccented galactic standard, filled the cockpit. "Unidentified vessel, you are broadcasting the Anderson beacon. Please hold your position. We are confirming your signal." Fenna, Grull, and Borl exchanged a look of pure, unadulterated shock. They had expected silence, or ruins, or perhaps a hostile defense grid. They had not expected a polite traffic controller. There was a brief pause, filled with the faint, nearly inaudible sound of high-speed data streams, as if their little ship was being scanned with an efficiency that made Concordance technology look like stone tools. The voice returned, now with a new warmth, a note of welcome. "Transponder signal identified. Ardarni survey vessel Stargazer. Registry. Oh my, you've had a rough trip." A soft chuckle echoed through the comm. "Your beacon is confirmed. Stand by for escort. Welcome home. We've been waiting." The main view screen, which had been showing the raw visual data from outside, flickered and cleared. It was now a direct visual feed, showing them the source of the transmission. It wasn't a ship, not a single one. It was a vast orbital ring, a structure of such elegance and scale it made the Concordance capital look like a provincial spaceport. It glowed with a soft internal light, and sleek, graceful ships, shaped like silver teardrops and flying wings, moved around it with silent, effortless purpose. It was a city in the sky, a crown of light hanging in the void. Below it, hanging in the infinite blackness like the galaxy's most precious jewel, was the planet, Earth. It was not a myth. It was not a ruin. It was vibrant, alive, a testament to survival, endurance, and a strength that had been hidden from the galaxy for eons. Fenna turned away from the breathtaking sight and looked at the containment field holding Captain David Anderson. His face, still serene behind the frost, seemed almost to be smiling. His impossible journey was over. His final, desperate message, a whisper flung across time and space, had been heard. She reached out and placed her four-fingered hand on the cold surface of the containment unit. His mission was a success. He had made it. And through him, the galaxy was about to learn a profound and terrifying truth. Humanity was not a scattered, struggling remnant. They were not galactic newcomers. They were a hidden titan, the silent, patient guardians of a peace they had built in secret. The sleep of ages was finally over. A titan was about to awaken. Borl stared at the vibrant earth, at the seat of a power that had chosen to hide rather than rule. All his life he had worked to maintain order, to preserve a history he believed to be absolute. Now he understood. He hadn't been a guardian of peace. He had been a warden of a nursery.